Right. First of all, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Mercer, as Kayla said, the head of the Arctic Sciences section. And I do see people introducing themselves in the chat. If you haven't done so already, please do. We do reserve the right to remove people from the meeting if we're not sure who they are, or if they're not part of our research community, or legitimate interested parties. So please do introduce yourselves in the chat. All right, so we do have some new staff in the Office of Polar Programs. Dr. Jim Olvestad has taken over as the office director as Dr. Marinelli departed on schedule. So he'll be with us at least for the next year. He has lots of experience in NSF and with facilities, and we're very excited to have his leadership. Colleen Strawhacker, Dr. Colleen Strawhacker is not new to you, but she has been permanently hired as a program director in the Arctic System Sciences program. So we congratulate Colleen and are glad that she has permanently joined our staff. Dr. Will Ambrose is back. So he's also probably another familiar face to some of you. He's back now on the Antarctic side as a permanent program director for the Antarctic Organisms and Ecosystems program. So we're excited to be working with Will again as well. Dr. Dave Porter is a rotator in the Antarctic Oceans and Atmospheres program. Joe Miller is a program manager in Antarctic Infrastructure and Logistics. He brings a lot of really great experience for facilities management as well to OPP. And Gina Selig is the new Canal Sea Grant Fellow in the OPP front office. Next slide. Great. I'm not going to read through all of these because, as Kayla and Liz were saying, we're going to have some breakout rooms, and we want to leave plenty of time for questions to do maybe like a main plenary type of session, as well as go into breakout rooms. So these are similar to slides that you've seen before in our office hours, just outlining our staff and our programs, what our programs support. These slides will be posted to the IARPC website as well, so you can certainly check those there. I think the only things to note are that Dr. Greg Anderson and Dr. Roberto Delgado are both out on detail away from Office of Polar Programs currently, but they'll both be returning here in the next couple of months. Okay, as usual, we're always happy to hear from folks who might want to come join our team, even for a year, up to 4 years. And so please do consider coming to NSF to work as an IPA rotator. We're looking for expertise right now in atmospheric science, oceanography, and I think a few other areas. And also, as you know, our Arctic Sciences programs are pretty multidisciplinary. So even if you don't fit one of those that I just said, please reach out and I'd be happy to talk with you about those, about that opportunity and what we might have available. We are going to be advertising for a facilities manager within the Arctic Research Support and Logistics program. So keep, if that's something that's up your alley, keep an eye out on USA Jobs for that announcement to be coming out. And that is to replace Mr. Pat Haggerty, who was with the program for, he was with the Office of Polar Programs since the 1970s in the Antarctic program, and he retired last year. So big shoes to fill, but we do need to get somebody into that role. And then there will be an announcement coming out for a federal position as a program director in Antarctic Ocean and Atmospheric Sciences. We should have a USA Jobs announcement out for that soon. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Arctic funding opportunities and our new solicitation. I'll turn it over to Dr. Strawhacker for this.
Thank you, Dr. Mercer. So many of you might have realized that we recently updated, as of about 3 weeks ago, our Arctic Research Opportunities solicitation. The new number is here, NSF 23-572. And thanks to Katie for throwing the link in there. So there are a number of changes that we just wanted to kind of make you aware of as you're preparing your proposals to submit to the solicitation. So note that target dates have been added for the Arctic Natural Sciences and Arctic Social Sciences programs. Target dates, you can look them up for the official definition at NSF, but they're not a hard deadline, but it gives you kind of a goal for those programs to kind of expedite review and get your proposal in to make sure your proposal is reviewed in those programs. I should note that all of the other programs like Arctic Observing Network and the Arctic System Science program remain no deadline. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about the timing for your submission. Another big change have been a number of supplementary documents have either been added or changed in some ways. So there is now a requirement for a plan for safe and inclusive working environments. The results of prior NSF support, which were previously required in your project description, can now be included in a supplementary document. So that gives you some more space in your project description to describe your proposal. There is now a requirement for a one-page supplementary document on ethical considerations and approaches to the proposed work. We point to our updated data management policy for the Office of Polar Programs, so you can check that out. And we've also added some flexibilities for letters of collaboration from community-based organizations. This has been something that's been in the Navigating the New Arctic solicitation for some time, and it really allows local Indigenous organizations, maybe nonprofits, to provide a little bit more information about kind of why they support or want to collaborate on this project. And they don't need to adhere to the strict template for letters of collaboration that you often find in the PAPG. I'll also say too is that previously when you submitted to the solicitation, you would select the program at the time of submission. What you do now is you'll say your intended program in the last line of the project summary, and you'll be submitting directly to the Arctic Research Opportunity Solicitation and not to the specific program. This is kind of a back end thing that we're doing in the Arctic Sciences section. It doesn't really change anything. It just makes us, helps us solve some database issues here at NSF. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I know there have been a lot of questions about the Plan for Safe and Inclusive Working Environment Supplementary Doc, which is being piloted across a number of programs. So I'll hand it over to Renee to provide a little bit more information about that.
Sure, thank you. So in an effort to help researchers who have fieldwork planned to address the potential environment that they're going to be working in terms of providing a safe and inclusive work environment, this is really an effort to get ahead of harassment, sexual harassment, or bullying in field situations, and enable researchers to think about it ahead of time, provide a plan in their proposal that describes the environment well, where they'll be working, what the potential challenges are in that environment, how the communication would be made back to their home institution or other relevant organizations if something happened, and how that situation would be handled. And so this is NSF trying to be proactive and really make an emphasis on that fieldwork should be something that's enriching for everyone, and thinking about these things ahead of time, put every project in a better position. So we're asking for those supplementary documents. This is a pilot effort, both in geo and bio at NSF. So you'll be seeing this in more solicitations. Our solicitation revision is one of the early ones to be released with this supplementary document requirement. I'm happy to answer any other questions if folks have them.
Thanks, Renee. You can move on to the next slide, Kayla.
Pass this back to Jennifer Mercer to talk about our Dear Colleague letters.
Yes, sorry, I was reading the all the introductions. I didn't realize the slide was for me. It's great to see all these people now, and I really appreciate people putting that in the chat so I can see where everybody's from. Okay. There have been sort of a slew of DCLs coming out lately. They're all listed here, and we encourage folks to look at these to see if they fit in, if your research might fit into some of these. So there are I think more in the works. I'm not going to name all of these or describe them. Again, these will be in the slides, but in the interest of time, just give you a chance to glance over these, and then we'll move on to the next slide. we can certainly try to answer questions on those as well later. Okay. All right, now on to the status of navigating the new Arctic, or NNA. So NNA is currently in its last year. It was intended to be all of the big ideas which were introduced in 2017 or kicked off in 2017 were intended to be 5-year programs. These were introduced by NSF's previous director, Dr. France Cordova. And so they are all in their last year and are going to be retiring on schedule at the end of this fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. So what does this mean for the current program and for the research community that's been working within this program? So the proposals that were submitted to the recent deadline for that solicitation are actually going through panel, or have just finished going through panel now. So they're going through a normal review process and a final set of awards. The final set of NNA awards will be made later this fiscal year. So we expect to fund a full suite of awards. The active projects will continue to be managed by your program officers and run the duration of your project funding time span. And the community office will also continue to serve as a resource in the same capacity that it's serving in now for all of the projects for several more years. So it should be through the life of these upcoming awards that the community office will continue to be active. So then what does that mean for next steps in new solicitations? So the budget request that came out and is public states that navigating the new Arctic within the Directorate for Geosciences will be superseded by a new effort, which builds on the core successes of NNA so far in engaging with local communities, convergence research, and broadening that scope then to look at resilient futures. And also we're looking at a more pan-Arctic scope and coupling with some other programs like the Coastlines and People program. Investigators and community members interested in conducting work in these areas in the core NNA program areas that you have been submitting proposals to are welcome to submit proposals to the relevant core programs at NSF. So that includes all of the Arctic Sciences programs. And you're very much encouraged to contact our program officers to discuss your proposed research activities. Next slide. I imagine there will be questions about that. Okay, go ahead, Kayla.
I'm getting into our research support and logistics slides. I'm going to pass this back to Renee to speak to some COVID considerations for the upcoming field season.
All right, thank you. So this year is a departure from previous years where we had quarantine requirements for people who are traveling either to Tula Field Station or to Greenland. And those strategies were very effective in keeping COVID out of our field stations and communities in the Arctic. But we all know that, we're in a different landscape with COVID now. And so the focus is really on trying to prevent having COVID when you come to the field or getting it on your travel to the field sites where you're working. So we're focusing on hopefully everyone is vaccinated and boosted. In Greenland, that's going to be a requirement. At Tula, that's a requirement. We're looking at social distancing, masking, and testing. Trying not to over-test asymptomatic people, but using it as a tool. And then if anyone is symptomatic, working on isolation and helping people to get well and managing the disease in the field. I mentioned vaccination requirement. We want everyone to know that field teams are going to be responsible for any outbreaks of COVID that happen in their field teams in the same way that they would if anyone got sick or injured in a different capacity. And so what that translates to is if the team needs to stay in the field longer than anticipated while someone gets well, if they need to fly home commercially instead of on some other scheduled flights, they're going to go back to their grant dollars to deal with that situation. The research support and logistics program won't be paying for longer field stays or commercial tickets home and that kind of thing. So we just wanted to provide that clarity ahead of time so that everyone can plan for it and really be working hard to avoid bringing COVID to your field projects. It can have a very detrimental effect on not only your own project, but in many places where there's some shared facilities, it can really impact others as well. So we always encourage researchers if they're doing something risky, to have a written protective plan describing the mitigation measures and the informed consent of everyone. This was something we used in COVID. If people were going to the field when COVID was, really a serious problem. And it ensured that the research institution, which is responsible for the conduct of the research under the award, is aware that this field team is going to a location. So this is something researchers can use to ensure that they know their institution is responsible. They know who to call and how to work with their institution if anything happens in the field. And the COVID situation could change. It has changed in the past mid-season, and just always to follow the rules in the state, local, tribal governments, wherever people are traveling, just observe those restrictions. Go ahead. We also wanted to remind our research community about a few things with regard to planning. And I encourage my colleagues in the RSL program to jump in if I miss anything. But we want to make it clear that because we need to plan the field work and also budget for field work separately from how the grants are funded, we need a year of time from the time of award to plan and budget for field work. And it's longer if you're going on a ship because of the ship scheduling timeline and also the cost of most research cruises. So that gives us time to plan, and it's best to, we just want to make sure people are aware of this timeline and that they're proposing in a way that will allow for good planning of field work and also the resources that are required to support it. Budgets have not gone up at NSF in an appreciable way. So the research support and logistics program that I co-manage with Kate Ruck and Frank Rack has been under the strain of having to plan and replan for COVID projects and get COVID projects in the field later and making up those field seasons in addition to fielding new things. We recognize the cost of goods have gone up, supply chains are strained. So we just want to recognize that our budget is constrained. It's more difficult for us to entertain new requests for additions. Like, can I add an additional person? Can I add a field site? Can I have a charter flight instead of the tickets we were planning to buy? And I think we want people to recognize that there can be a scientific justification for these requests, and you can bring them to us, but we are mostly going to need to say no because of budget constraints unless something's really justified with their science. So we want those requests to go to the science program manager and the RSL program manager so that we can have an internal discussion about how we want to support those requests. I mentioned that we won't be providing support for specific mitigation for individual projects or providing makeup time for time lost due to COVID in the field. I think we've shown that people can be successful in conducting their field research in the COVID context that we live in right now. So we want to also ensure people who are using our logistics contractor, Battelle Arctic Research Operations, are communicating and coordinating with Battelle far enough in advance to get good results for their field work. So please start working with your Battelle project manager early to make sure everything is in place. And on the right hand under the photo are some guidelines. These are minimum planning times. If you're going to Greenland or international field work, make sure things are getting lined up 6 weeks ahead of time. In Alaska, you can do it a little bit shorter timeline, but air charters can take several months because we have to get bids out. We have to get RFPs out to get bids in and get everything lined up. NSF has a role in approving aircraft charters as well. So these are really minimum times. You should be giving yourself 3 months to at least to plan your specific field season each summer or each field go around for yourself. So give yourself time. It ensures that we have the right equipment and supplies. We know that supply chain things have been an issue. So if we needed to order more of something, things aren't as on hand as they were prior to the pandemic. So this will give us time to deliver the support that's requested. Go ahead.
Great. And then I think we also want to comment on that we're kind of changing or reinforcing our risk management approach to projects that are working on the Greenland ice sheet. So what we're starting to do now, what we have been doing kind of the last few years as project come in, is starting to collect imagery at the proposal stage. And this allows us to just get a couple years worth of high quality imagery, especially during the peak melt times. We work with CRAL to produce reports looking at locations where projects will be working and traveling. And projects should recognize that their institution is responsible for activities under their award. So in some cases, we are requesting PIs get letters similar to the ones that Renee just described for COVID, so that if there is an emergency and a response has to be implemented, that your institution is aware of where people are and what to do and how to operate once an emergency happens. And we do have a final say in whether the location is too risky for contractor supported work. I think we are confident that we're able to operate safely in the Greenland ice sheet and want to continue that into the future. But we are upping our risk management game for these proposals to ensure that everybody comes back safely. Thanks. Next slide.
And I think we covered this earlier. This is a little bit more information about safe and inclusive work environments and the supplementary document. This is good reference to the Polar Code of Conduct and also the principles for conducting research in the Arctic, which are guiding documents that really establish the priority that we have on treating people with respect in the field, and including your field team members and people in communities where you're working and others. So these are the 4 components of that plan, and we're happy to discuss it with you. You should definitely reach out to program managers as you're preparing proposals anyway, and this is another thing that you might ask more about.
Yeah, and then we just also wanted to highlight a couple events that we have coming up, and one that's already happened, and then just some other resources. So the Battelle Aero team has just a plethora of training opportunities that PIs can take advantage of in preparation of going into their field season. Some of that can be done remotely, some of it can be in person. Some of it is just an index of really great resources to move through as you're planning your field excursions. And then we also like to remind people that researchers can use grant funds to acquire appropriate gear for students and researchers. I think that's a DEI component that we've seen be a potential barrier, especially for students coming into the field from financial backgrounds that may be low income. And so you do have the capability to write that support into your grant, and we really do encourage it. We recently held a crevasse webinar series that was a result out of the crevasse risk management and safety workshop that was held in 2021. It's already happened, but the recordings have been posted to the event website, and we really encourage that people check that out, especially if they're doing work in the Greenland ice sheet. And then we also have a town hall coming up to discuss helicopter operations at Tulik, mainly for the 2022 field season. And so there's a link to register for that. It is, I think, mostly focused on helicopter operations, but you'll have resources for the Battelle team and for us as well to have a broader discussion about Tulik. And then we'd also like to take the opportunity to announce that Alpine Air is going to be the new provider for helicopter services at Tulik Field Station for the upcoming season.
Okay, we do want to highlight that Greenland, the Greenland Research Council and the government of Greenland has launched their first ever national research strategy. And you can find the link to that actually, thanks to Alan and our link posters over there. The link is already there for you, but the English version is available online. And this is very exciting because this is something that the government of Greenland, the Parliament and the Research Council have been working on for quite some time now. And to be able to take a look at this and see how all of our efforts in Greenland dovetail with their strategy. So they have 4 main goals of their research strategy, which helps them also determine where they want to focus their own research community, which is quite active in Nuuk. And that's to anchor research in Greenland. Research must support sustainable societal development. The results must be easily accessible to all. and they must be, the research efforts must be at an international level. And so I think these are really complementary to the way we work in Greenland as well. I encourage everyone to take a look at that, especially if you're working in Greenland, to see if there are opportunities there to partner with Greenland's research community in Nuuk. Next slide, please. All right, Erica, did you want to, and I'll just maybe preface this with, earlier Renee mentioned the IARPC principles for conducting research. We also wanted to highlight that the Inuit Circumpolar Council has guidelines for research as well. So I'll let Erica talk through these.
Thanks, Jen. So in 2022, the Inuit Circumpolar Council promulgated a set of equitable protocols for equitable and ethical engagement. As most of us know, work that is occurring in the Arctic is almost always occurring in or within proximity to Indigenous communities, whether it's in Alaska, Greenland, Canada, and the Inuit Circumpolar Council guidelines really lay the foundation for how Indigenous folks in those areas want to work with scientists. So we highlight this so that our scientific community can really get a handle on what the priorities are and what the principles are for conducting research in and with and among Indigenous communities in the Arctic. And you'll see that these protocols laid out here, all of which are available online in a document, there's a link in the chat, really complement other parts of, for example, the communicate with intent, that really complements aspects of the Greenland National Strategy. They're looking for return of research results to the community, and those same principles are operative here. So we encourage you to familiarize yourself with these guidelines, as well as with complementary resources such as the principles for conducting research in the Arctic. And you may want to consider these in your ethical considerations supplementary document that comes to NSF with your proposal. May also be appropriate to address these guidelines and protocols in your project narrative. And again, contact your program officer for additional guidance on that. Thanks.
And finally, if that wasn't enough information for all of you, I wanted to highlight a few additional resources and media efforts that we have going on in Arctic Sciences and throughout OPP. Just a reminder that the Office of Polar Programs does have a newsletter that goes out quarterly, and it highlights polar research, funding opportunities, and all sorts of information about the latest happenings here at OPP. If you're not subscribed to get that, there is a link on this screen and it'll be dropped in the chat. Also, please reach out to our OPP communications team. They are lovely. The email alias is on this screen. Reach out to them with any media efforts that you may have going on, stories, science publications, anything that you might like to be further amplified by us. And finally, a large list of other resources that we think would be really useful to you, organizations and other things that are really prominent in the Arctic and that are really great for all of you to work with. I'm not going to go into too much details, but the links are here. They'll be dropped in the chat as well, and these slides will be posted for you to reference. So with that being said, thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Before we get into the question and answer, I just want to end with, we really love this time to speak with you, and we hope that you like spending time with us. And even outside of an office hour, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of your program officers with questions. We really like working with you. So really, thank you, and we love to hear from you. And now for the question and answer, we're going to move into something a little bit different than we have in the past. And I know breakout rooms can deter people and sometimes be scary, but we hope that's not the case. I want to start by opening up the floor just for a couple minutes if there are any questions that are really broad-reaching, high level that might pertain to the entire section, such as Colleen hinted at, maybe, if there's a question about the new solicitation updates that the whole is applicable to the whole section, we can do those now. And otherwise, we will move into breakout rooms and Liz will help facilitate that. In the breakout rooms, you will get to kind of decide where you go, are listed on this screen. So we'll open it up for any section-wide questions now.
And while people are getting ready to either put those in the chat or raise their hands, I'll highlight that Jack Dibb did ask a question in the chat earlier, whether or not the safety and safe and inclusive field plan is part of the merit review criteria. And Colleen posted the link to the FAQs for that safety plan in the chat there. And yes, it is. It will be evaluated as part of the broader impacts, which are just as important as the scientific merit in our review process. So it's a plug for that as well. Jack.
I was just commenting that I don't see you in any of the rooms. I was hoping to say howdy, but it's great to see you. It's been a while.
Thanks, Jack. I can hang out in the main room too, since they don't let me go into a breakout room. I can also hang out for a few minutes.
Well, you're not listed on any, so
Yeah.
I just asked.
I was checking as well, but more to make sure I wasn't assigned to something. Good to see you too, but you're not on video. It's good to hear your voice.
How's that? There I am.
Good. Yes. That's great to see you. Other questions or comments? All right. Well, Liz, if you want to start pushing people towards breakout rooms, and I can, like I said, I can hang out in the main room or something if people